Mr. President, last week, no, it wasn't last week, it was about 3 weeks ago, I guess now, President Biden released his skinny budget, and which gave us a top line for defense of $715 billion. Now, this is a reduction, and I want to make sure everyone understands this, because it's the cut is actually below inflation, and that's not where we're supposed to be. You know, we had this document here everyone agrees with. I don't know one person. This was 6 Democrats, 6 Republicans. And this was in 2018. This has been used as our blueprint ever since that time, and it has just remarkable the way it's come out. Oh, appreciate that. Thank you. Anyway, the recommendations on this are good. As I said, is 6 Republicans, 6 Democrats, all of them experts in the field of defense, and they came out with recommendations. And on this year, the amount of budget for our military is supposed to be between 3 and 5%. This is in the document in front of us here. And of course, this is actually a reduction, so it's way below what has been prescribed. Now, when it comes to China, there are 2 big reasons we need to make sure our budget matches our strategy. First of all, China is spending more on their military than ever before. As a result, they're getting more technologically advanced and starting to sway the military balance of power in their favor. There's no question about it, and I'll document that in a minute. The threat the Chinese military poses is not a distant threat. It's not something that might happen in 2030, 2035, or sometime in the future. It's a problem we face today, right now, and it only gets worse over time. So Admiral Davidson told the Armed Services Committee that he expects the threat to manifest this, quote, this decade, in fact, in the next 6 years. That's a sense of urgency. That's when they become greater than we are in many areas of defense and aggression. So today I'd like to spend some time dealing with the Chinese military, what they're doing, and this is what we're up against. This is why it's so important that we get our defense budget right. Let's start with China's military budget. Since 2000, Beijing's spending on People's Liberation Army has gone up 450%. 450%. Now, we knew that back during the during the Obama administration, that actually went up. Our reduction, it was a reduction in the last 5 years of 25%. At the same time, China went up by 83%. So this is what's going on in the world today. So the Beijing's budget for the military went up 450%. Now you compare Beijing's buildup with the rest of East Asia. At the same time, our core allies and partners in the region, that's Japan, Australia, South Korea, Taiwan, have basically flat defense budgets since 2020. Or compare it with our own military spending. As I mentioned on the floor a couple of weeks ago, at the same time China was adding $200 billion to their defense budget, ours was shrunk by $400 billion. We're certainly not provoking them with defense investment, and we barely touched our force posture in the Western Pacific over the past 2 decades. So if anything, our lack of action, our lack of investment is what is provoking China into thinking they can push around and threaten our friends in the region. The Biden administration says that they want to take allies and partners seriously, so we should listen when they say that they're concerned about Chinese aggression. Now, and they are, and the administration knows this. I've had visits with the president. He's fully aware of that. Another progressive talking point is that the United States spends more on defense than the next 10 to 12 or 12 countries combined. Now, that's not true. The reality is that any honest comparison of numbers shows combined, the Chinese and Russians almost certainly spend more than us in real terms. China's purchasing power is significantly greater than ours because they pay their workers next to nothing and have much lower material costs. So they also focus their defense spending on hard power. I'm talking about airplanes, tanks, ships, missiles, and the like. Now, why? Because they don't take care of their people. People don't understand this. At least 40% of our military budget goes to supporting our people. Now, that's not true with any of the communist countries that are out there. All they do is they give them the guns and they go out and kill people. We don't do that. 40% is a conservative figure. And you remember, Mr. President, the housing issue that was such a big issue that you were concerned with, I was concerned with, we were all concerned with. That's something that other countries don't have to worry about. That China doesn't worry about that. Russia doesn't worry about that. These are things that, and yet that's almost half of our total budget goes to those things for our troops. We take care of our troops. The rest of them don't. And that's the right thing to do, but that's just another reason. You can't do a dollar-for-dollar comparison between the Chinese and the defense spending. We need a better accounting. And incidentally, Senator Romney introduced an amendment to our last year's MDAA, Military Defense, and to get us a real comparison of spending. And the Pentagon owes us that report by October. Now, in October, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about this in our military because this is what the real spending is, not what a lot of people think that it is. Now, all of this to say we don't have a good sense of China's true defense spending, but we do know it's going up. General McMaster called it this is a quote, he said, the largest peacetime military buildup in history. That was what General McMaster said just the other day at one of our hearings. So they're not just expanding their military, they're modernizing and professionalizing it at the same time. Secretary Austin, our Secretary of Defense, rightfully calls China our pacing threat. But here are a few of the ways that they've been outpacing us because they are investing where we're not investing. The American people think we are, but we're not. China has a 355-ship Navy. You know, we've been talking about that for a long period of time here, how we're going to grow to a 350-ship Navy, and we haven't done it. Well, China's done it. They've achieved that last year, and while we were just talking about it, they were on the attack to get 460 ships by 2030. Now, by comparison, our Navy is around 300 ships and is likely to stay there for if our defense budget doesn't grow. In the air, the combatant commanders assess that China will have more fifth-generation aircraft than we do in the Pacific by 2025. Again, the fifth-generation aircraft. We're down right now to the F-35. There are not any others. Well, we had the F-22. The F-22 was our first fifth-generation fighter, and it was one that we were all very excited about. And they started out wanting 700 of them, and we ended up with 187, just for fiscal reasons. And so, again, that's where China is right now. That gets worse if we have a flat or declining budget here. China is expanding its arsenal too. The Pentagon's missile experts tell us that China is now over 350 launchers for medium-range ballistic missiles, which are capable of hitting Guam and striking United States warships in the Pacific. They've produced exact copies of our bases, our ships, and our aircraft to serve as targets. And they're out there right now shooting those targets. That's us. That's America. And they are shooting on the replicas of our equipment to show that they can down them. And then, by the way, they hit those targets successfully, I might add, and that's going on today. They also have thousands of short-range missiles. Many of those are pointed right at Taiwan. China's also doubling its nuclear stockpile and completing their own nuclear triad. And that's something that we have even criticism in this country, that we have a triad that is three ways of deflecting nuclear attacks on America. So that is what is going on right now. So China's military is charging ahead in just about every area. But a lot of the people who don't think China is a problem, they say that none of the Chinese weapons are as good as ours. Well, that was true in 1990. That was true in the year 2000. That's not true anymore. The Office of Naval Intelligence said in 2015 that China's latest surface warships were comparable in many ways to the most modern Western ships. Now, China has deployed thousands of ground-based missiles. We're still developing ours. They have fielded hypersonic strike weapons. They're still in the research and develop. We're still in the research and development. You might remember, Mr. President, because we saw that, the parade that was taking place in Beijing, they were demonstrating that they have these weapons that we don't have. And that was just less than a year ago. Just last month, the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence assessed that the China rate of investment, they will soon dominate us in artificial intelligence unless we do something different than we're currently doing. And while the Chinese will spend almost $50 billion on tech infrastructure over the next few years, national security infrastructure is apparently the only thing that President Biden doesn't consider infrastructure. So not only is China spending more on its military, but it has the tools to beat us. Don't take my word for it. The bipartisan NDS, now that's, again, this is the document that we've been using. And it's been remarkably accurate since 2018. That NDS commission said, right in this book, said the U.S. military might struggle to win or perhaps lose a war against China or Russia. That's what they said in 2018, and China's been going up ever since. Admiral Davidson told us the other week, there's only 2 weeks ago, that, quote, there is no guarantee that the United States would win a future conflict with China. China's military buildup isn't just investment for the sake of it. They are already flexing their new muscle to challenge America and American allies and American interests. And the PLA has deployed missiles, radars, stealth jet fighters, and bombers to islands in the South China Sea, claiming and militarizing islands in violation of international law. So just last year, the PLA fired anti-ship ballistic missiles into the South China Sea, clearly practicing to target U.S. Navy ships in the area. And that's what they're doing today. Those are Chinese troops walking on woody islands in the South China Sea, and the PLA has been expanding its network of strategic ports and bases around the world, from Djibouti to Pakistan, Cambodia, Sri Lanka, and elsewhere. And last year, China started going after the territory of India, which has resulted in dozens of dead Indian soldiers. They've continually harassed Japan and Taiwan in the air and on the sea. Their fishing fleets have terrorized small Pacific island nations. Over 200 Chinese boats are staking out a reef in the South China Sea claimed by the Philippines. China has just completed a new satellite constellation over Taiwan that allows almost constant coverage of the island, the highest known frequency of satellite coverage in the world. A few weeks ago, Taiwan reported the largest ever Chinese incursion when 25 combat aircraft flew into its airspace. And as the co-chair of the Taiwan caucus, this is of specific concern to me. Some people have forgotten that the aggression by nation states is not a thing of the past. People have forgotten how costly it is when deterrence fails. And that's why I'm arguing for sustained real growth in the defense budget. We know it's necessary. We know that it's attainable because the burden of defense spending on the economy today is half what it was at the height of the Cold War. The Biden administration is trying to tell us that we can invest in economic and technological competition or the military competition. And that's a false choice. We got to do the military. The reality is the Chinese are engaged in every dimension of this competition, especially the military dimension, and they're not going to stop anytime soon. So I'd have to say, do we really want to be there for our allies or partners? Do we want our children and grandchildren to live in a world where our status of leader of the free world is in name only? You know, my wife and I have been married for 61 years. We have 20 kids and grandkids, so I have a stake in this thing. I have a real concern. Do we want them, these kids, to grow up in a world where China, the same country that is committing genocide against the Uyghurs, silencing free speech and jailing activists in Hong Kong, gets to set the rules of international engagement? This isn't a hypothetical question. That's a question that we're answering each year when we set our military budget. And frankly, I'm disappointed in how the current administration is answering that call. We've got to be prepared to take on China from all angles of national power, and this begins with adequate resourcing of our U.S. military with real growth in the defense budget. There's kind of a myth floating around. I know every time I give a speech someplace in the state of Oklahoma or elsewhere, there's kind of an assumption that we in the United States have the best of everything. And after following World War II, that was true, but that isn't true today. And if America chooses to sit on the sidelines in this competition and we ask our allies and partners to face China alone, the failure of military deterrence becomes more likely, and that's an outcome that nobody there or here wants. With that, I yield the floor.